in the forts and whatnot, they all had flintlocks. This is a scaled down toy version of a flintlock that was typically used during the fur trade, and was used mainly for hunting, and then in times of war, this was a very prized possession for the natives, and some tribes would try to keep them out of the hands of other tribes so that they could reign superior over them. In addition to the flintlock that they carried, they had to carry powder and lead and make their own bullets. This is a powder horn. It's made from the horn of a buffalo, and they would fill this with the black powder, and then they could pull the plug out and pour it down the barrel of the rifle, and then wad the lead balls in as well. So this was an important item. They had to keep their powder dry and available, so they were able to sling this around when they were hunting. They carried a hunting pouch with them too, which is called a possibles bag, and they could carry their shot and patches and different things in this, as well as personal gear. There's several styles of these that were made, but they're typically just like a big purse to carry all the goodies that they had, and they had few. There's an inner pouch in this one as well. One of the most important things that they carried was a fire starting kit, and this became a tremendous trade item as well, to replace the bow drill that the natives have been using for centuries to start fire. What they would do is have a steel and a flint, and then they would make char cloth, and this char cloth is made by cooking a tin with pieces of cotton fabric in it, and just until it chars, and this will catch a spark very, very easily. So what they would do is take the striker and hold it in their hand, and then they would take a flint and get a spark to drop onto the char cloth, and then add some fibrous material. This is flax fiber here, but they could use moss or cedar, inner bark of cedar, and then they would catch this on fire and then add it to the kindling. So these two pieces became a very important part of fire making, and someone that is knowledgeable in starting a fire this way can start a fire as quick as you can take a match today and strike, and so this one doesn't spark very good. A couple of other things that were important was tea. That was a part of the daily diet of the fur trader and whatnot. This is Chinese tea that was pressed into tiles, which would be about 9 by 12, about the size of a sheet of paper. And each of them were in blocks that were scored like this. This is a solid block of tea, and then they would scrape this off to make tea. It's very compact, very dense, and makes a very, very good green tea. A luxury that was found at some of the fur trading posts was chocolate, and only the bourgeois and the upper echelon were able to afford chocolate. But chocolate was used to make a drink, and it was scraped into hot water to make like a hot cocoa or hot chocolate as we know it today. But it was in block form that it came to them. This is an example of another treat that was seldom carried on voyages and whatnot, but was sometimes found in the fur trade forts. And this is what's called a cone of sugar. And with this cone, they would take the paper wrap off, and they had a pair of nippers, which is like a pair of pliers, and they would nip chunks of sugar off of the cone. Each voyageur that was paddling was allowed for about 40 pounds of their own gear, and that included what they wore and their blanket and whatnot. They had a blanket, which would be a Hudson Bay style blanket or a Whitney Point blanket. Most of them had a cassette, and a cassette is basically a small trunk of this size, and this would hold all their worldly possessions in them. There were many styles. Most of them would be straight wood. They wouldn't be quite as fancy as this, depending on the individual. They did their own decor on them and their own lettering and things like that. But they would be able to carry their clothing and some of their extra gear, some of the things like their tea and powder and all their personal goods and whatnot that they had. The Voyageurs had good interaction with most of the First Nations groups, and of course there were those that didn't treat the First Nations well at all. But a lot of the voyageurs that overwintered out in the west in the fur trading areas took native wives, and a lot of them would abandon their wives when they returned to Montreal or returned to go back overseas to home. So that left a lot of mixed blood, which became the Métis. And Thompson's wife Charlotte was of mixed blood. She was Cree with a British father. Her mother was Cree, so she was of mixed blood. But her and David were married for 57 years and had 13 children. And she accompanied him on many of his journeys. Thompson in his travels by foot, dog sled, boat, canoe, horseback, traveled some 55,000 miles, 90,000 kilometers, and Charlotte traveled about 28,000 kilometers with him, most of the time pregnant, or with 2 or 3 kids dragging on behind it. It's just phenomenal to imagine what they went through, and what they considered every day. We wouldn't even look at it.